Behind me you will see horses grazing peacefully on these lands with a nice big dam, and they don't have a worry in the world. But the silent killer called African horse sickness is ever present. It's one of the most difficult subjects that I've ever had to deal with because it is so emotional. It is so expensive for South African breeders. There's no level playing field for us. But Adrian Todd has been working tirelessly with a group of very dedicated and very diligent people to try and find a way for the government to negotiate with the OIE and the EU and to make sure that South African horses do get a chance to compete on a level playing field, along with the Australians who are riding the crest of the wave at the moment, and the Kiwis and various other breeding jurisdictions. So without any further ado, let's go and join Adrian Todd, after which we're going to speak to Camilla Weyers, who's a veterinary surgeon involved in exactly the same organization. Adrian Todd is the managing director, and sadly, African horse sickness is not going away.
The reality is we're going to continue having outbreaks in the endemic area. That's, it's endemic. This year there's been 208 cases logged. The most seriously area affected is Gauteng with 144 to date. And that's a lot more than we've had previously, and I think that can be put down to three reasons. There have been late rains. The reporting has gotten much better. So you're having more cases reported than you did in previous years. And the third is the most concerning reason, because there are a number of people using unregistered, unproven vaccines. And, there's a reason they're not registered. So I'd just like to put that across, and it's not in thoroughbreds, but in other disciplines, to encourage people, please use the proper vaccines. They are the ones that are registered and they do work.
I honestly believe that there's a measure of irresponsibility on behalf of some of the people that have had deaths, particularly in the leisure market.
You can definitely say that, and one thing that I think we all have to understand is that there is work in hand to developing better vaccines. That's a very long-term process, but the world has shown interest and that is being developed. From a protocols perspective, we have to protect our controlled zones, and that's why we have the movement controls in place, and that's why we're so strict about them, because there has not been outbreaks in the controlled zones for over 2 years now, and that's what has allowed to get us back up to speed, where we've gotten to the stage meeting with EU requirements, where we're now pushing for them to come here and do an inspection.
I suppose to a certain extent, if you think that the country battles to run its books in terms of accounting, that free enterprise need to embark on a very concerted effort to give guidelines to people that own horses as to how to prevent their horses getting bitten in endemic areas, and exactly why they don't get bitten in free zones because of the climate.
No, definitely, Andrew. And I think the only way that we've managed to achieve what we have achieved, and the only way that progress can continue to be made, is through a system of public-private partnership between private enterprise and the state.
So are you positive that at this moment in time we're on the right track in terms of the accessibility to the rest of the world with all the tireless work that you've been embarking on with government and the EU?
I am positive. I know that it's been a frustrating and a long road, but I'm positive that we've taken the right steps. Government, for the first time, are actively involved, and we will get this across the line.
So it's actually incredible courage that has been shown by Mike de Kock, by his patrons that have sent him horses, whether it's been Yulon Prince or Majestic Mambo or Mar Shirtliff and Miranaresco, who've all run on the Dubai World Cup stage tonight, but with an arduous and very testing route.
Definitely, Mike, we've said it many times, he's been a true ambassador for South Africa, and going through that arduous route, imagine what he would have achieved in addition to what he has if he didn't have to do that. I mean, it has to be of benefit, and it will be of benefit for the entire country, and not just looking at thoroughbreds. If South Africa ever wants to host an Olympics, they have to be able to export horses. If South Africa wants to be able to raise up onto the world stage show jumping, dressage, all equine disciplines are going to benefit.
This year, it would appear, as far as social media is concerned, that there have been more incidences of African horse sicknesses. What's your understanding of this increase in incidence of African horse sickness cases?
Well, we could be looking at a number of reasons for this. There's definitely been an increase in awareness and an increase in people actually reporting diseases. Back in the day, people used to just keep it to themselves. the vets never used to report it to the state vets. That side of things has definitely increased, and which is a very good thing, because without the reporting we don't have the awareness. In certain areas of the Eastern Cape and in Gauteng specifically, that there has been an increase in cases this year. There are a number of reasons that could be. It could be the introduction of a strain that possibly is not well covered by the vaccine. It could have been a decrease in the use of our actual registered vaccine that we have in this country. We were made aware of the fact that the sales were down last year. On top of that, we've had the scientific revelation of the fact that this vaccine can in fact cause outbreaks, which unfortunately has decreased its use, although it is an extremely effective vaccine for stopping disease. And because of this, government actually have put in place recommendations that you only use the vaccine responsibly during winter months when the vector of the disease is not as active. And in fact, it is required by law that you may only vaccinate against African horse sickness during those times of months in the controlled area. Now, this could have also put an extra strain on our producer of the vaccine, because they possibly weren't prepared for the fact that they would have to supply an entire country with vaccine during a short period of time. Availability, in other words, yes. The availability could have been a problem. And if we're getting a decrease in the use of this vaccine, it will obviously decrease the protection, overall protection, especially on a herd level, if you're talking about overall herd level immunity. And it could be that people are just not using the vaccine, full stop, on purpose, out of choice.
Well, I think the word affordability comes into play very, very significantly in two spheres. First of all, affordability from the user's perspective. In racehorses, nobody in their right mind would not vaccinate their horse, because it's mandatory, because it's controlled. Your horses live in a finite area. They go to the track without walking through long grass. They're moving all the time, so the likelihood of them being caught by a Kulikwadi's midge is very small compared to that of a horse that roams freely as a person that doesn't have these control measures. And that's obviously very important with regard to the reporting of these cases.
Well, that is, of course, the next thing is that in order to get the virus, the horse actually has to be exposed to the vector, which is the carrier of the virus, being the Kulikwadi's midge. Having certain management principles in place in order to decrease the exposure to the actual midge is obviously going to decrease the chance of your horse getting that virus. Whether it's immune or not will be then irrelevant. If they're not exposed, they're not going to get the virus. It's, of course, easier said than done to completely keep your horse exposed from a midge. Midges are a difficult thing. They are very small. You can definitely decrease the risk of exposure by putting things up like the mesh, insecticide impregnated mesh on your stable and all openings. Stabling the horse, it's not going to completely decrease the exposure, but it will, or it's not going to stop the exposure, but it will decrease the exposure level of your horse. Fans, they're not good flyers, so any kind of air movement is going to help. And of course the use of insect repellents such as DEET, or products that contain DEET, and insecticides, so that you're actually, those that are biting are dying. Yeah. Vaccination is going to help you with your immunity, and then decrease in exposure is going to be your next level. And of course, basic immune health. So the health level or health status of your horse is also going to dictate how if your horse gets infected, how it handles that. If it's in a poor immune state for whatever reason, or infected with something else, for example, pyroplasmosis is one of the tick bite fevers that horses get. That is obviously they're going to struggle to deal with infection at that level then as well.
Would it be fair, as an opinion, to state that there are various countries, whether it's Australia or whether it's New Zealand or any exporting country, that have, so to speak, poisoned people on that European Union board, that things are worse than we are presenting?
Well, I think you're definitely talking to the wrong person on on that side of things. I mean, my is science, and I try and stick with that. But certainly, some of the decisions and some of the protocols in place do not tend towards the science. A small thing like only allowing vaccinated horses into the controlled area doesn't support science. A vaccinated horse is no more likely to be infected than a non-vaccinated horse. And let's face it, an unvaccinated horse that is infected is more likely to be visibly showing disease, so less likely to move, actually. But some of the decisions are not based purely on science. And I think that what we should be pushing for is that within our own country, decisions should be based on science and scientific backing. And we should be pushing for that internationally as well.